That being said, the people who are in the government, let's get to our next segment here, are revising some of the things that they've said. And this is probably, I mean, in my view, one of the most troubling things I've seen yet out from the administration. So let's put this up there on the screen. Dr. Fauci in a new interview with The Skim, which I didn't know was still around. It's like one of those women's email newsletters, apparently, that writes the news in a cringe. Anyway, it's called The Skim. He says, quote, I would
news
support.
for the ladies.
Yes.
They do it in like a sassy way. Kind of patronizing.
Cringe.
Anyway.
Yeah, I was like, I don't really understand why news can't just be news for everybody, but that's just me.
Whatever.
Here's what he says, quote, I would support that if you want to get on a plane and travel with other people, that you should be vaccinated. So this is something which we have not yet seen from fully embraced by the Biden administration, but we have seen in the past that Dr. Fauci had spoken weeks before a mask mandate went back into effect on federal property. That did become national policy. The booster shot was something that Dr. Fauci had been talking and pushing quite a bit. That became national policy. And at the very least, if he feels comfortable saying this out in public, it will become a vector of pressure then, Krystal, on the Biden administration.
Yeah, he's
saying,
influential, no doubt about it.
Why do you disagree with your top advisor that you don't have to have a vaccine mandate whenever you travel? And I think this would personally, I mean, for me, really just be a bridge too far and across the Rubicon moment. Because, and look, transmission in air travel is pretty scientifically proven not to happen. That doesn't mean they can't happen inside of an airport, which is actually where I think I got COVID, but that's another different story. Really what it is that when you look at this, it comes towards a mindset which we have seen prevailing throughout cable news and the elite intelligentsia, which is very much like not even offering a testing, whatever. It's just like, you have to be vaccinated. You have to be able to, you don't have a right to interstate travel. You don't have a right in order to move about the country. And I think that, cutting people off and, effectively putting them on a no-fly list is something which would really raise both the temperature of the country and I just think is just way too far in terms of the actual critical infrastructure. What do we hear every time we have to bail out the airlines? They're like the most critical part of the U.S. economy. Well, if it is, then I think everybody's entitled to it.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, there is some judicial precedent for, look, you don't have a right to air travel, but it being an essential part of, day-to-day.
Right. Yeah. What am I going to drive?
Human activities. So you can go, for business or for weddings or for funerals or whatever it is. I mean, that is where I have a problem, is when there is a lack of compassion, a lack of just sort of basic humanity. When you have people saying like they shouldn't be allowed to be, the unvaccinated shouldn't be allowed to be in public, period.
It's like,
that's insane.
Yeah.
Right? That's insane. Now, what I would say with this is kind of, he's asked a question about, it's kind of an offhand comment. If they did implement something like this and it had the either you're vaccinated or you get tested, I'd be okay with that. I think, to me, that is the balance that makes sense. I think it makes sense in the workplace. I think it makes sense, on airplanes and for travel and all of those sorts of things. Because, look, it is a problem if you have people traveling domestically or traveling internationally. That can fuel further spread. So it is an issue and there is a balance here. If you just have an actual, no-fly list for people who are unvaccinated, that is definitely a bridge too far. And it's something that, liberals have understood in the past, certainly when it came to
Islamic extremism,
the war on terror and Islamic extremism, and the fact that you could have this just random list of people who can't fly without requiring any sort of adjudication or rationalization. Just if you're on the list, sorry, you're screwed. This is a very troubling direction to ultimately move in. And one of the more extreme voices on this has been Dr. Leana Wen, who was formerly the head of Planned Parenthood, who's been making the rounds at CNN in particular with just very extreme and divisive and non-compassionate, I guess I would say, views towards the unvaccinated, and really very strongly in favor of curtailing all of their rights, saying they shouldn't be allowed to go in public at all. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
I absolutely think we should have that requirement. I think it was a major oversight on the part of the Biden administration to not issue this yesterday. And we have to talk about the reason. The reason isn't so much that we need to keep our train travel and plane travel even safer. They are pretty safe, although I definitely think that having a vaccine requirement would make it even safer and probably encourage many people who are vaccinated or who have young kids and want to protect them. Maybe it'll help to encourage those people to start traveling again. But there's an even even bigger reason too, which is I think we really need to make it clear that there are privileges associated with being an American, that if you wish to have these privileges, you need to get vaccinated. Travel and having the right to travel interstate, it's not a constitutional right as far as I know to board a plane. And so saying that if you want to stay unvaccinated, that's your choice. But if you want to travel, you better go get that vaccine.
So again,
travel's not a privilege.
Is it written in the Constitution that you can get on an airplane?
Right.
No, it's not. But do people have basic rights to, move about the country? Yeah, they do. Yes, they do.
Yes.
So look, to me, it's a balancing act. There are principles in tension here, but if you're just really fully in favor of putting the unvaccinated on a no-fly list with no testing out, that to me is way too far. But we should say, actually, a lot of the population is pretty on board with all of the measures that the Biden administration has taken so far. I mean, I am personally strongly in favor of the announcements from last week, but we can put up on the screen. A lot of the public shares that view. This is the first polling we've gotten with regards to Biden's specific vaccine requirements. This is from Morning Consult and Politico. So they asked the question, do you support requiring all employers with 100 plus employees to mandate vaccinations or testing? 58% support that and 36% oppose. Do you support requiring federal workers and contractors to be vaccinated? 57% support, 36% oppose, almost exactly the same numbers. Healthcare workers, even stronger support. You've got 60% support. Generally speaking, though, you're talking about like 56 to 38. You've got a public at this point that is majority at least vaccinated. Yeah. You've got 73% who have had at least one dose. It's a minority at this point that are totally unvaccinated. And so you do have a population that's getting pretty frustrated with like, I did the thing I'm supposed to do, and I'm sick of, being put at risk or having my life interrupted by people who are unwilling to do it. So there is a lot of public sentiment in favor of, pretty stringent vaccine requirements at this point.
My one caveat on always these polls is I also remember the lockdown polling right before 2020. Mm-hmm. And then in the way it politically manifested, it wasn't like that at all. Like we saw that, huge majorities of people in the polling at least said that they supported lockdowns. They said they supported masking. They said they supported all this. And then a lot of them went out and they voted for Trump. So it was like, okay, well, which one is it? This is a little bit more robust than kind of the lockdown polling that we saw, but I still just err a little bit more on the side of, I just don't know whether look, maybe it is the soft way that it expresses itself. For example, 60% of Republicans are vaccinated, but only 32% in the same poll say they support a vaccine mandate. Mm-hmm. So people who are themselves vaccinated are not saying that they support the mandate itself.
Yeah.
So how does that express itself in who they vote for in politics, right?
Right. Although I would actually say the fact that given how polarized these issues are, that you even have a third of Republicans saying they're in favor of mandates is telling. And independents side with Democrats overwhelmingly on these issues. Yep. I would also say in 2020, it's a little more complicated than just, people turned out to be against the lockdowns. Republicans had an economic message, and Democrats had some fuzzy, like, soul of America, blah, blah, blah. And people care about the economy, right? They want to have a job, and they want to have economic prosperity for themselves or their community, et cetera, et cetera. And Democrats really didn't speak to that at all. Their entire messaging was around safety and lockdowns and sort of like shutting things down indefinitely, to the extent that they had any messaging around the economy whatsoever. But, I do think that this is an important part of the story too in California, where you've seen a huge divergence in the polls. Newsom has leaned into the vaccine requirements that he's had there. Clearly, Biden feels very confident politically in where he's standing. You can see that very much so. Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, which is, a more closely matched state or more sort of swing state than California. Terry McAuliffe also leaning into this similar messaging. So I do think Democrats feel like they have a political winner, particularly in the suburbs, where there's been some concern that there might be some erosion back to Republicans around these issues. Now, again, Full caveat, do I think Democrats are still screwed in the midterms? Yes, I do. But on this particular issue, and there has been some signs actually that Joe Biden's approval rating has started to tick back up, that might just be that the Afghanistan news cycle where media all, trashed him for like the best thing he's ever done in his life is starting to be behind us. And people are starting to, focus on other issues. But I do think that that's an interesting indication.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how it manifests itself politically.
Yeah.
Because that is going to be the ultimate test here.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut. Our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions. All that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.